When you're shooting in shutter or aperture priority mode, you set the key variable, shutter speed in shutter priority mode, aperture and aperture priority mode, but your camera is still the one making the decisions about the exposure. It's making its best guess using its light meter as to the proper exposure for your scene. But what happens if your camera gets it wrong? Well, then you have to use something that's known as exposure compensation. Exposure compensation allows you to adjust the amount of light that's coming through the lens and striking the sensor, so you can give it more light or less light to make the exposure look right. To activate exposure compensation varies by camera model. Some cameras might have a button with a plus-minus sign on it. For my Canon camera, if I press my shutter button down halfway, I can activate exposure compensation. I'm going to turn on live view so I can show you very easily. By pressing the shutter button halfway, I can then spin my rear dial, and you can see there's a plus 1, 2, 3 with 1/3 increments, and then there's the neutral mark, and then there's minus 1, 2, and 3 with 1/3 increments. And as I spin the wheel, it adjusts the exposure. As I go to the right, it gives the exposure more light. If I go to the left, it gives the exposure less light. So I just pick what I think is the appropriate exposure, and once I've got that dialed in, I can go ahead and take my picture.